Hi, I'm Chuck Dorsett for Weaver Leather Supply, and this is the Leather Element. If you've got a good question for us or a good idea for a leather element, drop it in the comment box below. Also, if you want to know when our videos release, just click your notifications. You'll know exactly when these come out. I have to admit this, and I bet I'm not alone. The lowly keeper. It's constantly forgotten. If I'm working on a belt or a project that's got straps on it, I'll get right up to assembly. I haven't made the keepers. Now I have to back up, I have to cut, wait for dye to dry, wait for top coat to dry. How about, let's do this. Let's have keepers ready on our schedule and not theirs. But let's take that up a step. Let's make some very finished, professional keepers in about the same amount of time it takes to make 2 simple keepers. But let's start there. What's the easiest way to make a keeper? We'll talk widths, lengths, weights of leather here in just a minute, but for me, the easiest way to make a keeper is just using a double cap rivet. So right here, this is the anvil and a setter from our 4-piece setter set. We'll use this as our anvil. So I've got a strap, holes punched in both ends. Let's go with our small double cap, technically the 1/4 inch, and I'm just going to set a rivet right here. And there we go, we've got a keeper. It will work, but actually we're going to do one more thing to this. It's going to make it actually look pretty good. Now, let's say we're going to go with a much smaller strap. We've got a 1/2 inch strap we need to make a keeper for. We're going to have to get creative here. Well, if we look around our shop, like right here, a pair of pliers, that's actually about 3/8 of an inch by 5/8 of an inch. 5/8 inch strap. Well, right here, not by any means the intended use of these tools, but on every shank, on the oblongs, the round end, and the English punch, it's all the same size handle. It's about 3/8 of an inch by 1/2 of an inch. So I've got a strap. Let's do the same thing. I'm just going to use this as my anvil. And there we go. We've got a very small keeper. And I would typically use a much lighter weight if I'm doing that. But notice right here, we've got an overlay. That's really taking up a lot of room. We're going to work with that. But another way that we can make a keeper, I've never gone this way because to me it just doesn't seem durable, but it does have one advantage. I'm just going to take some of our wax thread and I'm going to double that on my needle and I'm just going to bring the 2 ends together. I'm going to butt these together and just tie a simple square knot. And there we go. Well, not bad. Again, to me, just not durable, but at the same time, the overlap, that's nice. All right, let's step back over to our main table because we're going to do one more thing to these that's actually going to make them look pretty good. We're going to wet form our keepers. It's going to make them very square, very clean, very professional looking. And all we need is some water. But we also need some blanks. And these are easy to make. And I've got these in multiple sizes. So right here, 1.5 inch. That's perfect for a belt. Now the plywood on this is a little bit less than 1/2 of an inch. Now, if we don't have a jigsaw and we're just not going to work in wood, we don't have to. Right here, it's a 1.5 inch blank. So what I've done, I've got 2 8 to 9s, veg tan, back to back, and then a 4 to 5 ounce. I've glued those together. That's going to make a good keeper. But this is leather. If we put a wet keeper on here and we press it, well, the edges on this are going to round. The pattern sheeting is going to keep that from happening. And that is one sturdy form. And right there, that's a 5/8 inch, same thing. But a smaller strap, I want a smaller keeper. So that's just 2 8 to 9s back to back with our pattern sheeting on the top. Now on these, I've got 2 sizes written on these. Well, if we're going to overlap, there's my larger size. So for a 1.5 inch, I need a 4.5 inch long keeper. But if we're going to butt that together, 4 inches. Basically, I'm taking off a 1/2 inch, which is about what our overlap is. So on a 1 1/4, 4 inches, 3.5. Here's a 5/8 of an inch, 2 3/4, 2 1/4, an inch. This is 3 3/4 or 3 1/4. And down here, this little bitty 1/2 inch, 2 3/4, or if we're going to butt it, 2 1/4. Now I mentioned this, but we can also make our keeper forms out of leather. Simply not really the best way to go. So let's do this. Let's wet these. Yeah, there we go. Now, let's force these onto our form. Even that out so our rivet's in the middle of the back. Now, let's take our fingers and let's just press on the corners. And we're just going to leave that right where it is. Let's do the butted. Now, I'm going to leave those right where they are. Let them dry. And our little 1/2 inch. And there we go. And not too bad on that. But that's a lot of leather there. We actually have a way to cure that. And it's a nice direction to go. Now, I'm going to leave these on the forms. Let them stay where they are until they dry. Or we can dip dye, wet with dye, and then work these on and just let them dry. The great thing about that is we can just leave them on our form, and it's so easy to add top coat to that. We don't have to take them off and try to get top coat on each one. So we're going to let that dry for a little bit. While that happens, let's step over to our punch table, talk about some weights. We're not going to spend a lot of time here, but this is a problem for us crafters. Here's what I'm talking about. We've got an 8 to 9 ounce piece of leather. We strap out a belt blank, but we don't have that leather in a lighter weight. Well, we can always overlap. What a mess. That's almost comical. It's so large. But right here, that overlap. I give my rivets a 1 1/4 inch spread typically. Well, that's going to fit, no problem. But when we bend this around, those rivets are struggling to try to get around that keeper. Well, a couple of ways around this. First off, we can go with a hand skiver. Not my favorite way to go. But with this, we can always take a strap about 2 feet long. Let's take our skiver. I'm going to bite in and then do my best to drag that along the strap parallel to our work surface. Almost impossible to do. Out of a 2-foot piece, we may get 1 keeper out of that, wasting leather and our time. We can go with a tabletop skiver. Great tool for us crafters. It's going to do all kinds of things for us, but it's a larger tool. A lot of us crafters not going to have one. Another way we can go, bellies. Very inexpensive. We've got these in multiple weights, and the cost on this, I bet I could cut 150 keepers out of that, putting the cost about 4 cents per keeper. But again, it's nice to have bellies in weights that we don't commonly use just for that reason. Now for me, keepers, anything between say a 4 to 5 ounce and a 6 to 7. In fact, that's just a simple 4 to 5, works right there. That's a 6-7 bordering on a 7 to 8, but that looks good, nice square keeper. All right, so let's back up because another way around this is we can simply butt that together. But again, I just don't like the wax thread. All right, let's put in a staple. It's going to make this work for us. But before we do that, why don't we set ourselves up so our keepers are ready to go? Now, typically for a 1 1/2 inch belt, I'll go with a 1/2 inch wide keeper. Smaller strapping, a little bit smaller, maybe say 3/8 of an inch for a 1 inch strap. But the point here, I can make 5, 6, or 8 keepers in just about the same time it takes me to make one. So I've got my wooden strap cutter set at 1/2 inch. Let's just strap out 2 1/2 inch straps. And there we go. Okay, let's cut these down. So we're going to make these for a 1 1/2 inch belt. So let's go 4 inches. In fact, I made 11, slightly more time than it would take me to cut one by hand. All right, now let's set our staples. In my opinion, the fastest, easiest way to make a professional looking keeper, we're going to go with a staple. Now, I mentioned fast. I can staple 5 of these in the same amount of time it takes me to punch the holes and set a rivet on one keeper, and they look good. So right here, we've got our little wonder, our driver. This is our staple driver. Then we've got our anvil. Big point on this. For us crafters, that's a little bit expensive. Now, if we're making a bunch of belts, or for a production shop, worth every penny, and we'll see why. The point I'm trying to make, though, for us crafters, we can always go with a 3/8 inch spot setter anvil, and it'll work just as well, much less expensive. So, right here at the bottom of this, we've got a small spring that actually holds the staple up in there. Easy enough thus far. So now, the one thing I like about this, we can slide our strap under the anvil. Now, I've got a little piece of tape there. Most of my keepers are 3/8 of an inch wide. So let's drop that right there and set our staple. That's a good looking staple. How easy is that? And it looks nice. All right, so I'm going to do a few more, then we'll add some dye. Good, we've got those. In fact, I did about a dozen of those in less than 2 minutes. Super fast. While we're here, let's go with an 8 to 9. We've got those done. All right, let's add some dye. The two colors I'm going to use most often when I'm making a belt, light brown and black. Obviously, the timeless classic. But we're saving time here simply by doing like steps together. That's faster. But how about we make this even faster? So right here, I've got just a piece of coat hanger. Now we can dye 6, 8, or 10 of these in the same amount of time it takes to dye one. So I'm going to dye 6 black and 6 in light brown. Let that excess dye drain off, okay? And let's force these onto our form, but let's do this. Let's go upside down. Let's go with staple up so we can make sure that's as centered as we can get it. Those are on. Okay, let's take a rag. Let's just clean the dye off the staples. Good. Now let's take these and let's work the corners with our fingers. There we are. That is going to make some good looking keepers. I'm going to leave those right where they are. Let them dry onto our form. While that's happening, I'm going to dye 6 in light brown. And those are going to look great too. Now, it would have been a smarter idea to dye brown first, then black. I had to change out my paper and my gloves. Not a big point, but would have saved a little time. All right, let's give those 2 hours, maybe 2.5 hours dry time. We've given our keepers ample time to dry, and those look good. Now, the 8 to 9 ounce, I forgot to dye that. Came back and dyed that. But in all honesty, 8 to 9 ounce with a staple, that's not bad. And if we put this on a belt, well, first off, that's a good looking keeper. But right there, not going to have any trouble getting rivets through there. Now, we're leaving these on the forms simply because now we can add our top coat. But this is a good point. This is a very easy way to make a form. And if we use the pattern sheeting, we can dye multiple colors on this because some simple alcohol will clean that dye right off. Okay, let's go with our leather balm because if I'm going to make a belt, most likely that's the finish I'm going to use. And we can just apply our leather balm with the keepers on the form. Makes it very easy to do. And there we are. And again, how easy is that? Overdoing these one at a time. Now, I would say though, if we're going to do an antique onto these, I would take these off because we won't be able to hit the edges with the antique. All right, let's take this, set it aside. Let's give those about 5 minutes. Let that wick in. We've given these a few minutes, so now let's take just a cotton rag and let's buff. And how easy is that? We've got a dozen beautiful keepers in almost no time at all. Clean, easy, professional, and we've got a nice form on those. The biggest point here, the keepers are ready when we need them. We can make 12 professional, finished looking keepers in about the same amount of time it takes to make 2 simple. I hope your keepers are beautiful, and I hope they're there and ready when you are. Thanks for taking time to watch The Leather Element. Good luck with your projects.